Hey guys, it's Dr. Chloe, and I just want to come on and give you a quick thank you. Your support over season 1 of the podcast has been incredible, and I'm so very grateful for each and every one of you. It really means the world to me. We are currently taking a short break while we regroup and reorganize for season 2, and I can't wait to get new episodes out to you soon. I also want to let you all know that I am creating a new community in Skool, SKOOL, so check the link in the show notes. You can sign on and join the group for free for the next month. And in there, I'm going to be uploading a couple of different courses that I've put together in order to help you optimize your health and the health of your family so that you can really feel empowered in making the decisions that you need to when it comes to your healthcare journey, whether it's the food that you're eating at home or the work that you're doing with a practitioner. So check it out. I'm really excited to be able to connect more directly with you all there. And I'm excited that it's going to be free for the time being. And you will be grandfathered into that if you sign up now. So check it out. And I will see you there. I hope everybody's doing wonderfully. And I'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, it's Dr. Chloe, and you're listening to the Radical Remedy podcast. Today's episode is with my dear friend, Dr. Laura Varden, who is one of the chief doctors over at the DNA company, where they are actively bringing your genetics into your own hands so that you can take personalized control of your health. It's really, truly revolutionary and very exciting. And this conversation is so interesting because we get into both the spirituality aspects of our genetics as well as the science behind how our genetics truly impact our lives, from our mental health to our ability to detoxify to all of the various different functions of how our body is working. So I find this really interesting. I love nerding out with her all of the time, and I'm looking forward to having her back after I do genetic panels on both me and Remy so we can see what she would recommend for us and how she goes through an intake with her clients. Anyway, I hope you guys love this as much as I do. Please let me know if you want more information about genetics or any of the topics that we're diving into so that I can make sure that I'm supporting you on your journey towards better health. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining me for this podcast. It really means the world to me. Thank you so much for joining me, Dr. Laura.
Oh, Dr. Chloe, thank you. I'm telling you, I enjoyed our first conversation when I had you on our podcast. I am so blessed and honored to be here today on yours and to be able to speak to your audience and, to talk to you because I just love you.
Oh, thank you. No, this is going to be such a fun conversation. I truly am in awe of your brain. I've been nerding out on your work all week, and it's just really astounding how much you can contain and so articulately express to people about DNA and these different variants that people are dealing with. So I would love for you to start with giving us a little bit of background about how we have these different genetic mutations or different variants and what epigenetics actually is, because I think there's a lot of confusion out there.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, when we're talking about our genes, human beings, our genes are like 99.9% plus similar. And, there's just little tiny changes that, some of these SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms happen that most genetic companies, when you get your genes done, that's what they look at. And generally, those changes in these genes, those little nucleotide changes, are associated with some sort of a disease state. And the thing is that we really need to start changing our mindset on the way that is. And that's the one thing I absolutely love about the DNA company. Because yes, we look at your genes and we look at those SNPs, but we also look at other aspects of the genes, things called copy number variants, how many copies of the genes you have, or the chromosome locus, genetic addresses, in different aspects. So it's not just looking at SNPs, but not just that. We really have pioneered the way we interpret this information. It's not saying, oh, okay, well, you've got, this percent propensity to get this particular disease and leave it at that and say, oh, well, sorry. We take a look at going, okay, well, yeah, that may be, but we interpret it in a functional way, meaning that we take a look at pathways. We take a look at the clinical relevance of these genes and these pathways so we can actually do something about it. So that way you are not destined to be in that diseased state, but we can shift context and affect and manipulate the epigenetics in order for you to be in that percent that has the variant, but doesn't have the disease. So epigenetics, first of all, I'll back up just a little bit. Genetics is the beautiful code that our DNA has. It is the hand you are dealt that doesn't change. It is the same in every cell, and it doesn't change from the time you're born to the time you die. But epigenetics can change. Epigenetics really is the change in expression of the genes that you have. And what affects that? The environment inside and outside of you. So we're talking about the foods that you eat, the air that you breathe, the toxins that you are exposed to, the traumas, the stress that you are under. It's what I call the allostatic load, which is all of the stresses, physical, chemical, emotional, all of it that you build up over your lifetime. So all of these things can affect the expression of your genes positively or negatively. And the beautiful thing about it is we have the power to change that expression. So, it really is a matter of, first of all, knowing your genes, okay? Know the hand that you have to play with, but then, like for what I do, helping people in the DNA company who purchase packages or, people that I work with, I interpret their genes. I teach them, they've got their hand of cards they're dealt. I teach them how to play the game. I teach them the rules to the game so that way they can then turn around and win that game of life with the hand of cards that they have been dealt. Because it's a beautiful thing.
It's so wonderful. And it's so profound how much we're able to impact our genes through our lifestyle and choices and supplements that we're able to take. Anybody who's listening likely knows that my son Remy has a rare genetic disorder. So I remember when he got diagnosed, the doctor basically gave me Remy's diagnosis and said, good luck, I've never heard of it. I printed out a research study, but didn't have time to read it. To which I said, go fuck yourself, Dr. Kunef at Cornell. As a doctor, if you don't have the interest in something this rare and challenging to read a research paper, or as a human, if you don't have the capacity to spend 5 minutes and read a research paper before giving this sort of diagnosis to a mom, interesting decision. Anyway, I digress. But I remember I was talking to the genetic counselor when I was there, and they were saying, I was asking about Remy's methylation pathways and trying to get some other information about different SNPs that might be impacting his detoxification functions and all sorts of different stuff. And at that point, it was about 8 years ago. So a lot of this research was just sort of beginning to be understood more. And a lot of people really didn't understand this. So this was a high-level geneticist at Cornell. And she told me, well, we wouldn't tell you about certain genetic mutations, like whether or not you have a propensity for Alzheimer's, per se, because there's nothing you can do about it. I was like, there's nothing you can do about it. And I was just like, have you ever heard of epigenetics? And she just looked at me like I had 10 heads. And I was like, look at the work of Amy Yasko. Like, look at some of these other, some of these things coming out. Like, you should really understand epigenetics before you're giving people these sorts of diagnoses. So that's a fun story of just how little Western medicine really understands how we can use our genetics and our lifestyle intertwined in order to optimize our health and how we can impact how our genes are being expressed. So one of the things that a lot of people probably have heard of is the MTHFR gene, which I lovingly refer to as the motherfucker gene. That one has been really, really popularized. And again, like Dr. Amy Yasko is one of the first people that I really started diving down that rabbit hole for. She does a lot of work with MTHFR, particularly for children with special needs, and her work is really fascinating. But even as a doctor, I quickly got overwhelmed by how complicated the different pathways are and how the different genes are interacting. I would love for you to just sort of dive into that a little bit and explain why this gene is so important and like what you guys are actually testing for when you're looking at the MTHFR mutation.
Absolutely. And I do want to mention that your unfortunate situation and, interactions with the doctors that, you had just mentioned, I want to highlight the fact of the difference between a closed mindset and a growth mindset. It's like, for me, I think of it that I never say, oh, well, you can't fix that. You can't do that. There are no absolutes because honestly, I have seen miracles happen. I have experienced miracles. So, maybe the likelihood is low, but I never say never. So, and it's just, you have to be curious. You have to start thinking outside of the box. You have to grab a hold of challenges and say, bring it on and have fun with it. That's how you come up with brilliant ideas and inspirations is through these difficult challenges that we don't seem to have ready, avenues of answers for. It's like, I don't want to be like everybody else and just, fit in a box and go, okay, protocol, this and here. And it's like, no, give me something unique and let me tease it out and work it out and help the person sitting in front of me. So I didn't want to digress too much, but I
love that. I think it's such an important addition in there. And it's also so beautiful. I mean, one of the things that I always focus on when I'm looking at Remy and our journey together is I never want to put any limits on where Remy could go. And I always want to give him every opportunity for healing that I find safe and potentially valuable. But I also want to love him for exactly who he is right now and not put any expectations on where I want him to be, and that's a hard space to hold. But it's one that I've sort of grown into in a way that's really powerful. And I think that growth mindset is so important, and it's fascinating how it can interplay in our genes. So we'll get into that also because that's super exciting.
Yes, I definitely want to put a pin in that because I have what I hope is wisdom from what I have learned from raising my children and now being an integral part, a daily part of my granddaughter's life. That, like I said, we'll get back to. So, but I know we have the teaser for the MTHFR. And so, when we look at the detoxification pathways, there are actually 4 major detoxification pathways that we test for in your DNA 360 reports. We look at the glutathione conjugation pathway. We look at the antioxidation pathway. We look at the glucuronidation pathway, and we look at the methylation pathway. So the glucuronidation pathway, we really focus more in the hormones section. But the others, everything is integrated. Everything is connected. And this is something that I think our Western medicine, allopathic medicine, tends to not think of. They are so myopic in siloing the issues. They look at the branches, at the leaves, and focus on their little piece, not realizing that branch, that leaf is attached to an entire tree that has just as large of an entire root system that's interacting with the soil that it is in. And all of it is important. All of it is connected. I tell my clients, genes do not exist in a vacuum. They are single players on a team that plays together with other teams. And thinking about that metaphor of teams and players, like hockey. Hockey is really big here in the Northeast. So, when we're watching hockey games and everything else, they will zoom in and talk about a particular hockey player, look at his stats and everything else. And we do that, yes, for these individual genes and, say, okay, this is optimal, this is suboptimal, or, and this is how it relates into the research to the beautiful language of papers that are presented and published from, all of these brilliant scientists and doctors that we build upon. So looking at that, we can have certain information, but we can never forget. We then need to zoom out. We need to look at the whole team, because this player can be strong in this area and maybe not so strong in another. And their other team members will have their strengths and weaknesses, but how are they as an entire team? How do they play together? And then how do they play together with other teams? So this is the same type of thing. So with the MTHFR, I should say that is one player on the team. For the methylation pathway, we actually look at 6 genes in that methylation pathway. There are actually 2 MTHFR genes, specifically ones, they actually have these RS numbers. Basically, they're little address locations that say specifically what that gene is and where it's located. And this is standardized across all genetic testing. That RS number is always going to be the same. It will be the same gene. So one of the MTHFR genes ends in 1133. The other one ends in 1131. So those are the 2 that we're looking at. So if anybody has, theirs, that's, same thing. So the 1133 is actually the stronger, the more prominent of the 2 MTHFR genes. So we look at that and see, okay, are you optimal? Are you suboptimal? Where do we go from there? If you're suboptimal, we don't just jump and say, oh, take a methylfolate, because that's a little, that's jumping too quickly. There are other genes in that pathway that can actually inform us saying, oh, maybe a methylfolate, that's B9, that methylfolate is not the appropriate form for you, because if you start taking it, you may feel better, for a short period of time and then start feeling worse. And when someone is overmethylated, they can start getting anxiety and fatigue. And, there's a plethora of other symptoms that can come with overmethylation. So the gene that we look at is the SHMT1 gene. That one tells us whether or not, or what form of B9 you should take, whether you can take methylfolate or whether you should take adenosylfolate. Now, a little thing here, people will probably be looking, where's adenosylfolate? That's not actually the supplement form that you will find. The supplement form would be folinic acid, not folic acid. Big difference. Folic acid you will find in many supplements, but that actually is synthetic, and it can actually cause issues, cause problems with your methylation pathway, but yet you will see it in so many things. And they put it in, added that when you see enriched or fortified, with folate, then it's folic acid, and you really want to be careful because that will mess up that detoxification pathway. Dr. Ben Lynch, he wrote the book Dirty Genes. He has dived into this, has done a tremendous amount of research, published, has wonderful videos that he actually dives in and gives all the science behind this and how all of this works. So I do, recommend, if you want to dive deeper into that, definitely take a look at his work. So, that particular gene helps us to know what form of B9 to take to help support that pathway, because the B vitamins are very important for the methylation pathway, specifically B12, which is also called cobalamin. Well, there are a couple of genes that we look at that can help us determine how well you process cobalamin and the methylation thereof, etc. That's the MTR and MTHFR genes. And it's the MTR gene that we look at to find out what form of B12 cobalamin works best for your system, whether it's the methylated form or whether it's the adenylylated form. Because again, if you are suboptimal and you can't process that methylated form very well, and you're taking methylcobalamin and methylfolate, you could overmethylate yourself. Not a good thing. So, and just to let your audience know that, yes, B vitamins, there are different forms that you can find. You'd find things like, again, methylcobalamin, adenosylcobalamin, hydroxycobalamin, even cyanocobalamin. The only thing, cyanocobalamin, yes, it's cheaper. You'll find it in a lot of things. Not so good for you, because that cyano is actually a cyanide molecule. So it really is not the best form for us. Definitely stick with, methylated, adenylylated, or hydroxycobalamin. And then the last gene that we look at is the FUT2 gene. And this really helps us to determine for B12. B12 gets absorbed in the body from the gut into the bloodstream using this particular receptor. The gene, the FUT2 makes a protein that's a receptor that actually helps to transport B12 from the gut to the bloodstream. Well, some people don't transport it too well. So even if you are taking foods rich in B12 or B12 supplements in pill form, you may not be absorbing it very well. So depending on the variant you have, you should have maybe a sublingual form instead of pill form. So now, as you can see, out of these, 6 genes, 6 players on this team, we have to look at all of them, seeing how they play together to see how best to support your body, your child's body, supporting this particular pathway that is so crucial for so many things, not just removing toxins, but for converting one amino acid into another amino acid, converting one particular molecule into another. So methylation is very, very important. And actually, I will give a little shout out to another gene that's very important in this pathway, and that's the COMT gene, the COMT gene, because this guy, he is like the final player. He's like the LeBron James on the methylation team. He's the one who takes that methylation basketball and dunks it, because he's the one who takes the methyl group, okay, this carbon hydrogen group, and actually attaches it onto the substrate, onto a neurotransmitter, onto a toxin, onto like an estrogen metabolite in order for it to be cleared. And so we look at the speed of which that particular gene, the protein, works, because that gives us information at how efficient, how quickly you are able to clear these things out of the system. So again, it's this beautiful constellation that we are looking at and being able to assess, which goes far beyond just looking at the particular SNP going, well, your MTHFR is suboptimal and, oh, well, too bad, so sad, you don't detox, maybe take some B vitamins.
Yeah, and that's a common, I think as MTHFR became so popular, it became a common recommendation that people just try methylated B vitamins. One thing that I'm sort of curious if you could dive into a little bit is I'm curious what you think about I mean, folate is obviously something that's recommended highly during pregnancy. And so women are often taking multivitamins, some better, some worse. But many of them are packed full of folate in various different forms. I remember making sure that I had a methylated folate when I was pregnant. But how might that impact the fetus and development? Why is that important to understand that so that you're making sure that you're optimizing your B vitamins and your folate and folinic acid, or whichever one is going to work best for you and ultimately as well your baby?
Well,
I wanted to take a moment and talk to you about Radical Roots. So I founded this company when my son Remy was diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder and intractable epilepsy. As a doctor of Chinese medicine, I knew that the best way to support his complex neurological and physiological needs would be through dynamic Chinese herbal formulas. I also started studying the incredible effects of hemp and its ability to support and regulate the brain and the body. By combining targeted Chinese herbal formulas with complete spectrum hemp and using a unique alchemical spagyric extraction technique, we have created formulas that are true game changers. Honestly, I truly believe that these are some of the most powerful herbal formulas on the market. Please check out radicalrootsherbs.com, use the code RADREMEDY, and get 15% off your first order. I'm so proud of these, and I think you guys are going to love them as much as I do.
When you're talking about, having that embryo, that little baby growing, it is sucking so much, a little parasite, sucking all those nutrients from you. But it also can be impacted with the toxins in your system. And we're not just talking endogenous toxins, the toxins we create from the metabolism of normal processes inside our body, endo meaning inside, from inside. But I'm also talking about exogenous toxins that comes from the outside of us. Glyphosate, which is like in so much food, and even no matter how good we try to eat, we can still be exposed. With the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, unfortunately, we are exposed with so many toxins. Well, the methylation pathway, like I had said, is very, very important for removing these toxins. And if you are not supporting your methylation pathway correctly, it is not working efficiently. Therefore, you can have more toxins build up because they're not being cleared well and quickly. And therefore, because you are sharing blood with your baby, you are sharing the toxins with your baby. So it is super important that you support, first of all, main thing, first and foremost, is to lower your toxic load, lower the exposure, mitigate these, issues of contact or of taking in, okay? Because obviously, with our toxic buckets, we don't want it filling so fast. So that's number one. Then we need to support our actual pathway so we are dumping that toxic bucket faster than it's being filled. And this is where the support of having B vitamins, organic foods, getting good sleep, deep breathing and, meditation and lowering the stress. But for the methylation pathway, again, if you remember, I was saying that it does a lot more than just removing toxins. It's also helping to convert one type of amino acid to another type of amino acid, other compounds in the bodies to other types that are very, very important for normal, healthy regulation and homeostasis. Well, if your methylation pathway isn't working very well, that can be a problem, which can affect your baby. And I do want to mention, because in our hormones, when for estrogen gets metabolized into 3 different metabolites: 2-hydroxy, 4-hydroxy, and 16-alpha-hydroxy estrogens. Okay, this is a normal process, and it is very important that the 2 and 4-hydroxy estrogens get methylated. Number one, the 2-hydroxy, when it gets methylated, becomes more beneficial. So yes, we want that. If the 4-hydroxy does not get methylated, it can actually cause DNA damage. We don't want that. So we want to make sure our methylation pathway is working efficiently. So, that's kind of a longer, a little bit deeper dive into why, but it's really important that when you understand the importance of all these little nuances to make sure that these detox pathways are working efficiently and effectively, and how that can directly affect your baby, then people will take more action, more conscientious, knowledgeable, meaningful action into the little things that they are doing and making sure they are getting the right forms to protect themselves.
A lot of what you're talking about in terms of epigenetics and the generational shifts also makes me think of generational trauma. I know I remember a research study on how Holocaust, I've never been able to find it again. It's probably on this computer somewhere, who knows? But it was about how the endocannabinoid system of Holocaust survivors had shifted over, the next couple of generations, like the next 2 generations of children had endocannabinoid system dysfunction as a result of the trauma that their family members had endured through the Holocaust. And, you hear a lot of these things like the Jewish-itis, I always refer to as a hat Jew from Brooklyn, like where we just have like sort of funky guts and people just sort of write it off to like genetics or whatever. How does trauma interplay with the genes, and sort of can that actually affect how our genes are presenting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, seriously, first of all, we all have to understand everything is energy. Energy and frequencies. Our thoughts are energy frequencies. We live in an electromagnetic world, universe, okay? So when you think about that, and there are studies published about this, I like to say where thoughts go, energy flows. And this is where here's a couple of examples. Something as simple as thinking of your favorite food. Okay, let's get something very decadent. How about a hot, gooey, chocolatey brownie with some vanilla ice cream and whipped cream and hot fudge and you can start feeling the tingling in your mouth and the saliva going. Now, is there a brownie around? Can we smell it? Can we see it? No. It's in here. Our minds, our imagination has created a chemical, physiological reaction just through thought. Okay, so there's one immediate example. Another one is the fact of how our thoughts and focus can affect things outside of us. Dr. Emoto, he was Japanese. He unfortunately passed away, I think it was back in 2014. But he did a lot of research on water molecules, crystallizing it, like creating little snowflake shapes. And what he did is he would infuse thought energy into a little vial of water and then crystallize it and then see the shape of that crystalline structure of that snowflake. And like he would do love, okay? And it would create the most beautiful, intricate, crystallized snowflake. And the other one was hate. And you know what? It was a splatter. And he did this for several different things and also different locations, like for wards, and in different locations of water locations. Also having the water with music being, surrounded, and then would do that. Absolutely amazing. I would encourage anyone to take a look at his work. But really, the takeaway from that is that here we can affect the crystal, the base structure of water through our thoughts, words, and intentions. Now, we as humans are made up mostly of water, anywhere from 70 to 90%, depends on who you talk to. Okay? That's a lot of water. So, the way that we speak to our children, the way that we speak to one another, how do you think that is affecting the water within them, the structure, the energy that they are? Makes a huge difference. Not to mention that works upon the rest of the cells of the body. I mean, we in science do not know all of the intricacies of how, when you start getting to that subcellular level and the quantum level, how does it know how to do what it does?
One thing I was mentioning to you before is I've spent my life sort of cultivating my mindset, right? I've always had like a quote book and I've always been really into that. So I'm always trying to find ways to look at the positive sides of things and the possibility in the pain, and shift my focus on things. I've always thought that was the hard work that I'm doing, but it seems that in your mood and behavior testing, perhaps there's more genetics behind that. I'd love for you to dive into that test, some of the things that you're looking for and how our genetics might be impacting sort of our personality, our behavior, and our moods. Because I think that's really interesting and important for people to understand as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that's one thing I love about our tests, again, is because we have it in 7 different sections. We have mood and behavior. We have cardiovascular, detox, sleep. We have hormones, fitness, longevity, diet, nutrition. The first thing that we generally start with is mood and behavior. And, here we're looking at, how well do you, your dopamine receptors. So how easily does it, are you able to feel pleasure and reward? How quickly do you clear these neurotransmitters? That's very important. We look at how your serotonin, how well you make serotonin, how well you transport it. We look at the adrenaline, that receptor, the noradrenaline receptor, because that really tells us, if you stay in an emotional state and how you remember things. How affected are you by incoming stimuli? Are you able to prioritize that? Or are you more, ADD, ADHD, where your attention is pulled every which way because it's more difficult to prioritize stimuli and be able to ignore what's not necessary and stay focused? We also look at BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is so important because this deals with neuroplasticity. How well do you, grow those neurons? What fires together, wires together? How good are you at that? And that also works into, if you are not so good at doing that or suboptimal, it can reflect in putting more meaning into things, having your head spin, which can affect your sleep. When you lay down at bed at night, when everything's quiet and you can't quiet your brain, or you go to sleep, but you wake up 2-3 o'clock in the morning and it's just nonstop. We also look at your clock gene for sleep, because really when it comes to sleep, that is foundational for good health for so many reasons. So we focus on the mood and behavior because honestly, the way that you process information, the way that you experience situations, life around you, the way you remember them impacts everything else you do. I mean, we can take a look at, cardiovascular, diet, nutrition, and give you recommendations going, okay, exercise this way, eat this way. But guess what? If your mindset is not there, if you're not processing these neurotransmitters that help you have energy and feel good, guess what? You're probably not going to follow those recommendations very well. You are not going to be compliant. So that's one of the things, like I said, one of the first things that I look at and go over with someone to say, this is how your brain works at a genetic level. This is, the way that your genes, the space of which your genes have to express, and where, based on your life, the person sitting in front of me, because when I do an intake, when I first meet them, I learn about them, who is sitting in front of me at that time. And I take them where they are and say, okay, here are your genes. Here's how I'm interpreting the situation and your life as you are telling me, and as I've read on your intake form. This is what we can do to help navigate, to make sure that you have the energy, that you feel good, so that way you can make the necessary changes to better your health, to be healthier, to be the best you that you can be from moment to moment to moment. So that way you can help your child. You can be there for all of the other people who rely on you. You want to show up as your best self. You want to be in excellence every day from moment to moment. And in order to do that, you need to know what you have to work with and how you can manipulate, turn those little dials. Don't be a victim of your circumstances. Be the captain of your ship. Even though you may be in, an ocean with lots of waves, be the captain and learn how to navigate it.
I think the work that you do is so empowering and so essential. And I love how you speak of both the art and the science of genetics and how we can really take control of our health through this knowledge, and this deep understanding that you have. I think it's such a beautiful test for people to take. I think it's so important, particularly for moms these days, to really take control of their health, and especially considering the assault that all of us are having on our systems when it comes to toxins, whether they're environmental or energetic, whether it's Wi-Fi or glyphosate or just the chronic stress that we're under as a society. I think doing a test like the DNA Co and getting a really clear evaluation of how you can support yourself based on your own genetic profile is so powerful. And I think that's also incredibly powerful and empowering for taking care of the next generation as well. So I know a lot of the moms here who are listening have children with some variation of chronic health challenges. And I really highly recommend this. I haven't gotten it done yet, as we said. So I will do this for Remy, and then we will go through an intake. So any mom out there who's curious can hear what it's like and how that empowers me and Remy in our journey. Remy and I have been having a bit of a challenging bit. He's been hysterically crying. It's like a common thing for kids with this disorder around this age, but he's been hysterically crying for hours a day. And it's pretty challenging. So I'm in a phase where I'm like, okay, I've got to start doing our next couple of things towards healing and looking at how this next new shift in phase in Remy's life is going. So this feels like it's very fortuitous that this is coming about now. And I'm looking forward to getting this done and seeing how I can continue to support him as best as I can. And this seems like such an incredible resource for that. And you do work with children quite a bit, right?
Yes, I do. And actually, there's two things I definitely wanted to hit upon before we finish up here. So number one, yes, I do have pediatric clients. And oftentimes when parents come to me to get their children's DNA done and go through a program, they really want to know, how best can I support my child? What do we do? What is the best avenue for them, in a career-wise or, in sports or in all of these different things? And yes, I can read the DNA and, speak to the parent. And I like to meet the children at least once or twice during these sessions and help guide that. Now, I can't say for sure, oh, yeah, they should be CEO executive and, play soccer. And it's not that specific, but looking at their mood and behavior, I can give you insight on saying, okay, well, based on their profile, they may be more likely to be more focused in binging activities because they can, be so absorbed where it's harder to pull them away. They're not very motivated. Okay. Or I can, in the same realm say, oh no, actually they're going to be bouncing from thing to thing to thing and, very motivated, but not seeming very, happy or, satisfied with the things that they're doing. I can actually tell that within the DNA, or saying, oh, okay, well, these are things you may want to start implementing because, they have a hard time prioritizing incoming stimuli. So you want to make sure for them to focus on their work, that they have to have a clear, clean space, nothing cluttered, no outside major, noises, or have, some sort of white noise, in the background that can help keep them focused, or ways to help them sleep better. Oh, they definitely need to have, blackout shades, very little sound, have maybe a weighted blanket that would help, all of these things that are very important, little things that can make a huge difference. I can actually look into their DNA and give insight to. So, that's very important. And also their detox pathways are definitely something that gives a tremendous amount of insight and information, so that way you can be that much more aware about how sensitive they could be to like EMF exposures, to the type of mattress they're sleeping on that could be impacting their sleep. Really diving down into so many different things. So definitely a good thing to have for children, to have you help them more precisely in this personalized medicine. And, just understanding the nuances that two children in the same family, totally different characteristics and behaviors and learning styles and everything else. And we can validate that through their genetic profile. Now, the second thing I wanted to mention is that it is so, so important for you moms out there. I'm a mom, I am a grandmother, that for us to show up our best every day for our little ones is to make sure that our cup is filled first. We need to take care of ourselves. That is not selfish. That is self-full. You cannot fill someone else's cup if your cup is not full first. Just like they tell you on an airplane, put your mask on first, then put the mask on of the person, that is with you. All right? Same type of thing. And we also want to be smart about how we take care of ourselves and how we are doing things. We don't want to be burning our energy and not really getting anywhere. I've been there. I know what it feels like. And it's just like, get off the hamster wheel. So we need to work smarter. And there's a very interesting story from Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's the 7th habit. Sharpen your saw. So think of this as a story of, there is a woman that's walking in the forest, and this guy is sawing this tree and just going at it, but not really getting very far. And she notices that his saw is kind of dull. So she walks up to him and says, "Hey, why don't you sharpen your saw?" He goes, "No, I can't. I'm too busy. I gotta saw this tree down. I'm too busy. I don't have time." Okay. And what I want you to take away from this is that, yeah, you can be busy sawing away with this dull blade. Are you going to get very far? Are you being very effective? No. If you stop and take the time to sharpen that blade, then go back to sawing that tree down, guess what? you will be a lot more effective in cutting that tree down, and it will take you a fraction of the time. So take the time to take care of yourself, to recharge, so that way you can be fully present, be your best self for those that you love. Don't give them half of you, give them all of you, but make sure that you give yourself all of you as well. So take care of yourselves. Again, it's okay to do that.
I couldn't agree more. I think that was so beautifully said. I always say people are always impressed with all the many things I've done with Remy, taking him to Ecuador for months at a time and starting Radical Roots and doing this and this and this and that. And the thing that I'm most proud of and the hardest lesson that I had to learn was that the most important thing for Remy and for any child, it was for me to get healthy and happy so that I could show up for him. And I look at so many of my friends, little girls who are watching them burn themselves out. And so even if you're listening and we have to use the manipulation tactic of actually doing it for your children, take care of yourself, because that also is going to have, it will cause an intergenerational shift. And as women, we really need to shift this dynamic. We're certainly not going to get it from outside of us, the patriarchal society that we live in, however we want to go down that rabbit hole. But unless women start prioritizing ourselves and our health and our happiness, nobody's coming to help us do that for ourselves. So I think you just said that so perfectly. And I would, again, I feel like I'm going to, if you're down, I would love to pick your brain on so many different things in the future. You just have so much wisdom, as a doctor and as a mom and a grandma and just as a human. It's just always so inspiring to talk to you. I'm so very grateful for your time and your wisdom today.
Thank you so much, Chloe. I so enjoy hanging and chatting with you and doing this and just imparting the thoughts and knowledge and just, what you learn. Don't keep it to yourself. Speak, share, because you never know who needs to hear it. And if that one piece of information is that catalytic change in their life that can make all the difference. We are here to help support and love one another, to help teach one another. And I am learning every day by those I interact with. And I am so eternally grateful, honored, and humbled by the brilliance, the love, the compassion, the kindness, the tenacity, the dedication of people like you, and for your audience, that are listening, that are putting in the time, the energy, and the work to show up, to be the example for those around them. I just am truly honored. Thank you so much. And I would love to do more of these with you.
I know. I think it's going to be a problem. We're just going to have you as a recurring guest. All right. Well, let me end this now.
Thank you for listening to the Radical Remedy Podcast. The Radical Remedy Podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor/patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.